All right, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Politics 2.0, a Saar political reveal. We are joined with today with Prashan De Visser. Prashan De Visser is a very active individual when it comes to the realm of Sri Lankan politics. You may have seen him in the Aragale movement and everything. So, Prashan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Okay. So, Prashan, how are you feeling today? How's your day been? How's things?
Things are good. We've just had a little bit of a family emergency, so I've been focused on that. But also, apart from that, a good day with the family.
Okay. So, Prashant, before we dive right into the world of politics, I've got a few questions prepared. So, let's start off with a very general question, right? We've witnessed a lot of change in the recent time period here in Sri Lanka when it comes to politics, economics, and everything. So, in your opinion, Prashant, what happened to this country?
Well, that's a very broad question, but I'll try my best to try and summarize my thoughts. If you look at Sri Lanka in the last 74 years of independence, um, we have made many choices as a nation, as our leaders, our political leaders, and even us as a citizenry. We've made choices, and we are the collection of those choices that we have made and decisions that have taken place. But as I look at our country, everybody felt when you read the history and Sri Lanka at independence, we were the second strongest economy in Asia. We were only second to Japan. Everybody looked at Sri Lanka and they said, "This is a beautiful country, so many resources, an educated populace, and a growing education system was growing strong." Um, we were diverse, and they saw that as a strength. There was, very different perspectives coming together, and they also saw the innovation of our people. Our people were very adaptable. They were moving with the times. We were not lagging behind the rest of the world. So a lot of experts thought Sri Lanka was going to be a thriving miracle. This was the country to watch out for. And unfortunately, despite all those predictions, we haven't lived up to our potential. And if you ask me why we haven't lived up to our potential, I would say a few key reasons, in my opinion. Number one, we haven't created an inclusive Sri Lankan identity. We've had cycles of violence, prejudice, and discrimination and hate have plagued our nation. Some very conservative estimates say that we have had at least 250,000 people have died in senseless violence. Some estimates go as high as 500,000 have died in 74 years, where we've had almost every 10 to 15 years, we've had bloodshed in this country. So, how do you progress forward when we continue to have animosity and mistrust and division in the country? Countries that have thrived have worked very hard on creating that inclusive identity, ensuring that all citizens feel like they are first class citizens and build a meritocracy, and we fail to do that. Second reason is that we have been plagued by rampant corruption, and especially in the last 15 years, we've seen like an acceleration of that corruption, and along with nepotism and incompetent leadership coming into power and just ransacking the nation and just stealing us of all our potential has taken place. And we as citizens haven't done enough to hold these corrupt individuals accountable. We haven't demanded justice until the advent of the Aragale. My third reason I would say is we haven't managed our economy well. We haven't pushed hard on production. We haven't looked to become sustainable as an economy. But even worse, we have never had a budget surplus. In 74 years of independence, we've only had four budgets that have had a surplus. So 70 budgets have been living beyond our means as a nation. And this has caught up. And as a result, today, on top of the corruption, on top of the incompetence, you add that decades of bad management of the economy is now haunting us. So for me, those three things stand out. Obviously, there are many other reasons, but those three stand out to tell us where we are at today or contribute to where we are at today.
Thank you, Prashant, for that. I think those three reasons are very valuable information and insight as to what happened to us as a nation. As you said, we've had multiple budgets and only four had a surplus. And I mean, that's a lot to think about when it comes to the terms of politics and economic management and everything. So, Prashant,
Yeah.
we know that our country is a representative democratic country, right? We elect our officials. So, is it the fault of the citizens or is it the fault of the politicians for the economic crisis we're in right now? Is it a 50-50 thing? What happened? Who's to blame for this?
Yeah. So there's a statement when it comes to your health, and people say you are what you eat. You can't blame anything else. If you are eating unhealthy, if you have bad practices and so on, you become that. That becomes a problem. And the same way in a democracy, unfortunately, you are who you vote for. And over the years, we have depicted our insecurities have taken over. We are very educated, well, at least we are literate and relatively educated people, but we let our emotions and our ethno-religious insecurities lead us when we vote. We're not looking for a competent leader. We're looking for somebody who represents my ethnicity or my religion, somebody who would protect me, somebody who would be a hero to protect me from my own people, my own brothers and sisters in this country. And we've allowed that fear psychosis to guide us. Or we've allowed short-term game. We give it to the gangster who becomes a politician who is willing to bend the rules to benefit our businesses or benefit getting us a government job or putting our children to a good school or benefit our business. And therefore, cutting corners and electing people who are willing to cut the corners, who don't have competence to do anything to transform an economy or revamp all our structures, but just have the thuggery to do something, a short-term favor for you. Those things add up, and they end up causing severe issues. So, whose fault is it? I would say yes, politicians have failed as people, but at the same time, we as people have failed to make the right decision. And some may say, "Hey, I never made wrong decisions. I voted for the right person." But the truth is, more often than not, we have voted for the lesser evil, and we have become very mediocre. So let me just do the bare minimum, or we haven't been actively involved in the political arena to canvass for the right candidate. We have allowed black money and drug money and corrupt money to just brainwash people without us getting on the streets and educating people as active citizens to say, hey, there are consequences if this person gets elected. If we did a stronger job at that, then our destiny as a country would have been different. But I believe it's not all lost. There's a new generation that's rising up, and we can make the right decisions now, undo some of the wrong decisions, and ensure we don't make the same mistakes over and over again.
I mean, Prashant, here at Politics 2.0, our main goal here is to debunk all of these political hegemonies and dogma that spread out across the years. And we plan to educate people about what's going on, about different opinions, about what we should do as a nation. With that being said, I think the Greek term, the Greek philosophical term, politics means the art of managing the state, right? So, with that being said, do you think the former government had well played that art of managing the state?
I don't think in any stretch of the imagination anybody with any sense of common knowledge would ever say that they managed this economy well. Our previous president was the definition of incompetence. And they came into power just based on a very elaborate marketing scheme and by selling fear and prejudice and hate, saying that we needed a military man, we needed a strong man, we needed a benevolent dictator. All these lies were forced down the throat of our people, and we should have questioned that. And unfortunately, 6.9 million people brought it hook, barrel, and sinker. And as a result, you had incompetence from day one. And it was arrogant incompetence. It was not just incompetence, it was absolute denial of the level of incompetence. And as a result, made one bad decision after the other. And now we're suffering. And we unfortunately we're not going to get out of this rut in even half a decade. The economic damage is so deep that we're going to have to work at it. So yes, it was badly managed. How, if you ask me, number one, um, tax benefits or tax relief at that time, when the IMF and all economic experts were saying it was not the right thing for Sri Lanka to do. We didn't have a sustainable economy. Giving trillions of rupees of tax benefits and taking away government income was a massive mistake. Fertilizer ban. without doing it in a gradual way when no other nation in the world has ever done it, going ahead with that, destroying that. Certain ways of even dealing with the pandemic, especially how they did with the education system and children, especially in rural areas where they didn't have access to internet or devices, smart devices to engage. You just destroyed that. And then the way they dealt with the teachers, and just one after the other, just
I
and
think we
then
witnessed
find
the behavior where the former president went into a rural area and he basically interrogated a teacher and put her on a very hard spot. I think that was one of the incidents where we
yeah,
can.
yeah. Yeah, the multiple incidents of trying to overcompensate for the lack of capacity and knowledge and competence by doing all sorts of drama, and trying to take skills from a military background where you are. It's not a democracy in a military background. You just tell what people to do and they do it, but you're assuming that you know to do this stuff in this democracy. That was deadly. But then also international relations. We have so much goodwill, and the regime went on to destroy our goodwill. During the COVID pandemic, we were like the only country to once again still go into racism and prejudice during a pandemic and not allowing Muslims to have the burials the way that they would have it, and forcing cremations on COVID patients. Even when the Middle East and countries made pleas saying, please don't do this, no other country is doing this, went on to do it for 2 more months or so. Just and now when we're stuck, how do you go back to these countries and say, hey, can we have some help? Japan had a light rail project that brought in an income to the country. It was well said. And in a Japanese culture, it's a shame-based culture. You don't shame a culture that has been a loyal friend to this country. They were asked to leave, and now you're expecting to help. So many mistakes. So yes, badly governed, and today we are paying the consequences.
All right, so Prashant, that is some really good insight. And I mean, it's their fault at the end of the day that we are suffering this. We are also partially to blame because we elected them, but that is because of the political dogma and hegemony they had going on. And they basically marketed the entire political campaign and everything. So we will be right back after a short break with Prashant and Kai on Politics 2.0. Stay tuned. All right, and welcome back to Politics 2.0 with Kai Parker and our guest Prashan De Visser. We were talking about what's going on in the country, what happened to the country, and Prashant stated that a very intriguing metaphor where he stated that when it comes to food, we are what we eat. And I think that is what happened to our country, that we elected these representatives into parliament. And moving on, Prashant, hi, welcome back. So, Prashant, moving on,
Welcome back.
right? So, we've witnessed that the participation of the youth has drastically increased after the Aragale movement into politics, right? We've seen the youth going out and about protesting, posting on their social media. Do you think the youth, or at least a part of the youth, was following a trend because the youth has that mentality of chasing trends? Or do you think the youth had a genuine interest in politics this time?
Thank you, Kai. Just before I go to that, just on the quote before, when I said you are what you eat, and we are who we have elected over the years. Unfortunately, I think that's something that we need to really reflect on. We have allowed these people. Sometimes you may not have voted a certain way, but we've allowed this culture of politics to continue, and as a result, we've become that. And so it's never too late to change that. In regards to the youth, it's very difficult to, even if you talk about your A-level batch, not all of them are alike. Now to talk about your entire generation and say let's talk about youth, it's always dangerous, and because it's an entire generation. There's going to be different perspectives. There are going to be things that are common. There are things that align us together. There are things about our experience that hold us together, but obviously it's diverse. But having said that, I think young people, one thing that you've noticed is that they realize their future is at stake, and they need to start speaking up, start being active, no longer passively just taking anything from these incompetent leaders or corrupt leaders, and start saying we need to have a say. And that's brilliant. That's exactly what young people should be doing in a democracy. So that's a good thing, but that's not something that's been our reality for many years. Young people have just outsourced the political responsibility to a bunch of 60, 70-year-olds who've been career politicians and saying, I trust my entire future to you, no questions asked. So that's a good thing that we're moving away from that. Secondly, also, it's coming to a point of realizing that this blind loyalty needs to end. Our parents' generation and maybe even our grandparents' generation, there was a thing of, we're green all the way or we're red all the way, blue all the way, that kind of a blind political loyalty and almost an inability to critically think or to constructively criticize or to hold accountable. That's a dangerous reality in a democracy, because then you're allowing people to have some form of dictatorship and get away with things without being held accountable. So now I think there's a generation that says, I am not loyal to any one of you politicians. I am thinking on my own. I'm not your slave. You are an elected official. They know their rights. They're reading the Constitution. They're speaking out. So that's another great step in the right direction. And then we're talking about ethnocentric politics for nearly 7 decades. And here's a generation that's saying, okay, we might have got fooled by that, but never again. You guys used the Easter Sunday bombing. You used all these things to manifest itself in the political arena for your benefit. And from now onwards, we are not going to allow you to use this divide and rule attitude. We are going to hold you accountable. We know when you do that, you're trying to hide from your sins and what you have done against us. So those are all very strong changes in the right direction that we see in a younger generation. And then you have to acknowledge the fact that 100+ days on the streets, consistently protesting on social media, on the ground, putting pressure. That was a phenomenal achievement to get a president who had executive powers more powerful than any other president, maybe in the world, definitely in Asia, to pack their bags and run for their dear lives, realizing that they have failed the people. And an entire family that had 70% of the nation's budget run by a family, having to evacuate, having to realize we have wronged the people and now they're going to hold us accountable. That was serious pressure. And in previous movements in the past that have been violent, hundreds, thousands of people died. But the Aragale didn't have to kill a single person. There was one minister who unfortunately died, and that also they find out it was a personal vendetta and his bodyguard shooting somebody on the ground, and that leads into that. But these young people didn't hit the streets with guns and bombs and cyanide capsules or suicide vests. They went with their banners and their posters and their tweets and their live streaming. They were the new generation. They decided, they put their bodies on the line. They could have been shot at. Some of them were beaten. But still, they didn't hit back. Not even a stone was thrown. When we were mercilessly hit by tear gas, these kids didn't even throw a stone back. They figured out how to make sure the tear gas was dysfunctional as opposed to even throw it back to the officers. And so there was so much nonviolence. So we can be proud of that. So that's yes. But yes, in the midst of that, did some people join in because it was a trend? Of course, young people like to do what's hip. And if they see something's working and something's inspiring and something's worthy of emulation, they'll do that. But you can't blame them for that. Does that mean that everybody was there for a trend? Of course not. People are putting their lives on the line. They could have been shot at. One rogue agent could have ended up shooting 50 in no time, but they still stood there. So I think we can be proud of this generation for taking a step. But my fear now, Kai, is that they've been demonized. They've been called terrorists. They've been arrested. They've been
They,
put into prison.
in a
And
very unfair
this,
and unjust manner, and this happens under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. So, Prashant, what do you think
exactly.
about the Prevention of Terrorism Act? Do you think it's barbaric? I mean, it truly is, isn't it? Like these individuals, these youngsters, they were protesting for their rights
Yeah.
and for their
It's a
future.
draconian law and
It
has been
is.
said so by many constitutional experts and the international community. And it's just, we are not at war. And even if we were at war, there were questions in how it's been used. Because literally, if you're arrested for something, I believe in 3 days, you have the right for representation. You have the right, and they, right now, you could go under the PTA for 1 year and they couldn't, you just have no say. For doing what? On what evidence? Who decides? This is a dictatorial, extremely dangerous law. And none of these young people even own a gun or a grenade or even a sword. They were not violent at all. They did not attack anybody. But now you're. So what happened is throughout history, when young people have rose up to share their pain and their grievance, the political establishment and those in power have decimated them, have beat them to submission, have never taken the time to listen to the pain and correct it. And here's a generation that refused to take arms and still express their grievance, not just for them, for people who are suffering. And what did you do? You bought the PTA, you arrested them, you demonized them, you called them terrorists when they had done no wrong. You're now asking them to pay for the damages on a lawn in the capital, up to 5 million rupees of damage. But what are you talking about? An economy that was bankrupt. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for the $40 billion of allegations of mismanagement of funding? Who's going to pay for our retirement funds of our parents being invested in Greek bonds when the whole world said it's not going to work out? Who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for the damage they've done in the parliament during the political coup? Who's going to pay for the corruption and the rampant abuse of power? This is hypocrisy at its greatest, and it should be exposed. And the politicians, including the president right now, should be ashamed of what they're doing to these young people.
I mean, it's truly tragic to see what they're doing. And as you said, Prashant, it is draconian, it is barbaric, and it's unfair because these youngsters, these kids, people of my age, they were just protesting for their rights, and not only for their rights, but for those who were less fortunate than them. And to see them being arrested and everything, it is truly tragic. And how do you think the judiciary should proceed into this?
Mhm. Well, I think first of all, the power lies with the executive president. The president can make a call of the using of emergency laws and the PTA. No one else is asking him to do it. He's doing it. And so we have to hold the president and the party that's propping him up accountable. Is this what you want to do? And in a few months, we have to go to Geneva. And in that, we've talked about human rights, and the PTA has been very clearly targeted and said this is a dangerous law. And you go on using that when we need the goodwill of the international community, when we need support, doing that. How are you planning? Like, we have people who are suffering. 6 million people are having experienced the food crisis. Sri Lanka has the highest rate of malnutrition among children. We have real problems. We're still trying to negotiate a deal with the IMF and the World Bank. So many things going on, and you're going after the man who stole the iron at the president's house or is accused of it. Or you're going after a young person who didn't steal anything, who's just speaking against the corruption that was there. That was their only fault. And hunting them down as if they're common criminals. And so I don't think it's the judiciary. I think it is the executive president and the party that's propping him in power need to be held accountable.
Circling back to the party that's propping up the current president in power. So there was a statement made by two MPs of the party stating that if President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is to return to the country, he should be appointed as the prime minister, and that the SLPP supports them. And simply because of the fact that 6.9 million people elected him, he is suitable for the position of prime minister if he is to return to the country. What do you think about that, Prashan?
I'll try to be polite and be professional in the words that I
Yes.
use. But by no means does the former president have the mandate of the people. If they so believe it, then call for general elections immediately. Test it out. Prove it. If they're so confident in that and they're holding on to it, I don't think even these parliamentarians have their mandate anymore. And they know that that's why they're trying to drag it for 2 years. And mind you, Mr. Wickremesinghe, the president, currently does not have a mandate either. And therefore, yes, it's constitutional and all what they want to say, but if you're talking about the mandate of the people, that's long gone. I dare any of these parliamentarians to go to their very seat and to stand their ground there and try to make a speech right now and walk away unscathed. They are hated. They have betrayed the people. They are the reason for people's suffering, and they have no right to talk about a mandate from before.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So Prashant says that the current government, the ruling party, has lost the people's mandate. What do you think about it? Do let us know, and we will be right back after a short commercial break. right, and welcome back to Politics 2.0, a SAR political reveal with Prashan De Visser. We were talking about what's going on in the country and how the people's vote and everything has been lost by the current political party, and how the current ruling party has lost the people's mandate. So, Prashant, welcome back to the show. And we were talking about how the current ruling party has lost the people's mandate, and how you dared the current ruling party to bring forth a general election based on a statement that was made by two SLPP MPs about how former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa should be appointed as the prime minister upon his return to the country. So, circling back to party politics and everything, Prashant, do you think the formation of a youth party should be implemented?
Well, I think first of all, we should have more young people entering into the political arena. Um, I, we have first of all more women and more young people. Less than 5% of our parliament are represented by women. That's embarrassing for a country with so many competent women. Even if you look at our universities and our higher education, women are the majority, and they're not given opportunities and nominations. Most of these parties make the lame excuse that not many women come forward. But the truth is, many of these women have no chance. They're not given a nomination. They're almost bullied out of getting into positions in political office. At the same time, when it comes to young people, I think less than 15%, 24% of our nation's population belongs to that youth category, and we don't have uh, a handful of parliamentarians under the age of 35. So leave alone a youth party, I feel it's important that youth are given nominations in these establishments. But even new parties emerging that are predominantly youth is important. And if they're not going to give you an opportunity in the establishment, let's create our own and move forward. But it's not just young people alone as a generation. You need to have an alliance of people who think right, people who are driven by the right agenda, who have a true desire to serve and be transparent and accountable to the people. If you want to change the culture, you need to infuse new thinking into the political culture. And whether they be young or old, it doesn't matter. We need that to the system right away.
Okay, thank you, Prashant. So, talking about financial mismanagement and everything, so the way a company works is that whatever financial investment they have, whatever expenditure, whatever income they have, they all have it managed and documented, and the whole transaction of everything is very transparent. But when it came to our governments, we did not see any transparency. So, if we are to move forward as a nation, how should the government maintain their transparency? What should they do? What should they implement?
Yeah, great question, Kai. I think first of all, my recommendation, and I think a lot of people are pushing this. An organization called Transparency International Sri Lanka has been pushing this for a while. When you ask the parliamentarians to declare their assets publicly, I think that's a very important ask at this stage. Only 15 out of 225 parliamentarians have declared their assets publicly. They say, no, we declare it to the election commissioner or to the speaker, therefore it's fine, but apparently they just have to pay a small fine even if they don't. And regardless, if you have nothing to hide and you're a servant of the people, you should declare your assets publicly to prove that you didn't make any money while you're here. Most of these guys are career politicians, but they live lives as if they're business tycoons. What have they done to amass such a wealth in a country that they have no results to show for? And so we need to ensure, obviously, these politicians are not going to bring out legislation to force them to do that, but we, the people, have to demand that. Declare your assets publicly every year to the people because you're serving the people. Secondly, campaign finance laws need to be put in place. These parties and these politicians, for their individual campaigns, spend millions. Some estimates say a minimum of about 50 to 60 million per general election seat campaign, an individual parliamentarian. Certain parliamentarians have been accused of spending over 200 million rupees on their campaign. So we want campaign finance laws. Limit the amount you're spending, and then declare all of what you have received and how you spent it. They're not going to be able to declare their black money, their drug money, their corrupt money. And what happens is when you spend that much money, you're eventually going to have to pay back. You're going to have to pay back those questionable business leaders who invested in your party or your election, or all of that. And as a result, you encourage corruption. They can't pay that back on their parliamentary salary. So then you're opening the door for corruption. So we need campaign finance laws, and we need to make sure that even these parliamentarians cannot get away with abusing the system or abusing their power. And so that's important to do that. At the same time, when it comes to these agreements, that these loans that were taken, whether it was bilateral loans with countries, whether it was multilateral organizations that you're receiving funding from, whether it was private bonds that were received, whatever it is, there needs to be more transparency on what are the dealings, what are the interest rates, what's going on here, and all. Many of that was hidden. Gazettes after gazettes just approving certain agreements, approving the sale of certain assets, and so on. So we have to start demanding that there is transparency, and then at the same time, we cannot allow this level of nepotism to ever cripple Sri Lanka again. One family, can you imagine this? One family, 70% of a nation's budget, they can discuss and organize at a family dinner. This is not a royal family. This is not a family that has done great things for this country, but it's a family that decided to hold on to that much power. And regardless, even if they were the greatest thing that ever happened to this family, in a democracy, you do not allow that much nepotism to run rampant. And we loved it. We questioned it. Some were fearful, they didn't talk about it. Some thought, well, it's okay, maybe they'll do something good for the country. But now we know what the end result is. So these are a few things, reforms that we as people have to push for in order for stronger transparency and accountability.
Thank you, Prashant. And that's truly intriguing because, I mean, this old generation of politics believed in family politics, nepotism, and segregation, right? So a lot of Sri Lankan politics revolve around racial, ethnical, and all of these types of segregation and dividing in order for these politicians to run their political agendas. So, do you think there is a certain influence of religion over Sri Lankan politics?
I think I'm a strong believer of the separation of religious institutions and governance and politics. Because unfortunately, when you look at it across the world, wherever there's been a majority religious group, and you let the religion and the majority have unbalanced power, it ends up corrupting the religion, whether it's Buddhism in Sri Lanka, whether it's Hinduism in India, whether it's Islam in the Middle East, or whether it's Christianity in the West. If you allow the religious majority to have overwhelming power to influence a culture and all that, what happens is the religion itself will be made corrupt, but at the same time, either will of the people or the needs of the people will be forgotten. And politicians will try to use the religious card to hide their incompetence, to hide their corruption. They will try to play to your emotional and religious and spiritual sensibilities to try and hide a lot of their misgivings. And so that's why we need to push for more. And sometimes that's the biggest thing to play, especially when you have a country where these politicians don't have results to show. They haven't delivered on their promises. So then they have to go back to the divide and rule and just play the religion card, play the ethnicity card, saying, hey, I'm your man, I'll protect you. And yes, I didn't deliver before, but I'm still going to protect you from all these others who are out to get you. And we can't fall for that trick anymore.
Thank you, Prashant. And I think it is something that has run rampant in Sri Lankan politics because wherever we look at in the recent history, we see that these politicians utilize religion and everything, and they basically marketed their entire campaign based on religion and culture, which is truly detrimental if you think about it in a very democratic sense. And moving on from that, Prashant, um, these rulers have failed us in economic management and everything. So, what should be the first steps in bringing our country's economy back up to standards? And what should be our goals, or rather, our methods of improving our country's economy on the long run?
Okay. So I think first of all, we have to look at ways to generate more income as a country. And so I think we need to look at tax laws. We have to be a country. We're one of the least tax paying nations in the world, and we have to correct that. We can't afford to do this anymore. And there has to be an efficient system of collecting taxes from people's income to whatever it is, or not from the poorest of the poor, obviously, but there are people upper middle class and above that need to pay their taxes and to have stronger laws for that. But at the same time, we need to start increasing productivity as a country. You know, there's so much of production we can do. There is innovation here. There are amazing young minds. I've been going around the country. We've received as one of the organizations that I lead called Sri Lanka Unites. We received 100 applications from innovative entrepreneurs from all 25 districts. Brilliant ideas. The ideas that they have done already launched off with their skill, with their strength. If they have the investment, if they have opportunity, they'll be developing this economy from the bottom up. But most of the time, if they don't have a political connection, if they don't have some sort of a helping hand, they're lost. And so, what if we can identify these people, support them, so that we're starting to produce as an economy and we're starting to export our products? We can do much more. And we can add value to just without giving raw ingredients from this country, add value to these products. There are so many things that we haven't even touched. And I was just, if you're looking at so many of, whether it's from jackfruit to coconuts to so many products. We haven't even scratched the surface of what we could do with it. Export stuff to all across East Asia, and there hasn't been industries that have been developed towards that. And so we need to push for that. We need to invest in that. And if we do that, we will have a great. And then also when we're talking about the new technologies and e-commerce and using IT industry, we can do far more if we invest more, if we graduate more students with these basic qualifications, we can be a powerhouse in this. And if we start investing, looking at the industries that have done well, even in the midst of a civil war, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of the economic crisis, we still have had industries that have done well. Just imagine if you take away some of the red tape and the challenges and invest a little bit more, how much more will they do with the garment industries and our tea industries and so many things that they'd say, oh, if only the government was intelligent enough and caring. Our tourism industry, we haven't even scratched the surface. We have all these people with all this talk, but we haven't delivered. And so we need to come to a point that we starting. So when we start working on these areas, we will start thriving as a nation. We can. We are capable. And one last thing, I really feel like the Sri Lankan diaspora, we have 3 million Sri Lankans living outside Sri Lanka. They still love Sri Lanka. Whatever ethnicity, religion, like this is their home country. And they're looking for ways to come back, invest, engage, start building stronger relations. You know, all these countries, whether it's China or India, they take care of the diaspora. They know that they're critical for the economy. And so they have so many forums to keep the diaspora engaged, to help them invest, to help them come back, help them feel at home, and to really make the economy thrive by the benefit of their exposure and their financial capacity over there. We've done nothing. We've isolated the diaspora. Sometimes we've gone after them. We've made life miserable. And as a result, their investments are not coming in. And then finally, we're living close to two economic superpowers, India and China. India's middle class, the Mumbai University just released, I believe, 600 million Indians just stepped into middle class. That means they're spending between $3 to $12 a day, each individual in that middle class. What products are they consuming? Who's going to ensure that that market, forget about the rest of the world, 600 million consumers across the border, across our shores in India. And we can start creating industries to tap into that market. We can produce. And they are now looking to travel. They're looking to have experiences. There is goodwill and attraction to Sri Lanka. Let's start getting creative. And well, if you're stuck in the head in corruption and how to pay your bills and how to make money for your children, you're never going to make this country great. But if you have a generation that's not thinking for themselves, but thinking to transform this country for their children and their children's children, it can be done. We just need a decade and a half, or maybe 2 decades, of intentional engagement with intelligent, capable, honest people, and we can transform this country. So it's time to stand up and make it happen.
Thank you, Prashan. And as you said, previous governments and everything, they've even criminalized the diaspora of Sri Lanka. So you said that if we can bring down investors from diaspora and everything, we could build up our economy. And with that being said, you said that India has released 600 million Indians into the middle class who are spending around $6 to $12 per day. And that is an untapped market and it has a lot of potential. So, first question is, what should the Sri Lankan government implement as, you know, forums or platforms to bring down the investments of these diaspora Sri Lankans? And let's start with that. What should the government
Yep.
implement?
So, first of all, if you look at the 3 million Sri Lankans abroad, and you look at the foreign currency that is being invested back in the economy, we're only having about $7 billion comes back a good year, right? Out of the 7 billion, only half of it, 3.5 billion, come from these 3 million people. The rest of it is all coming from low and middle skilled labor in the Middle East. They're sending all what they gain. So 3.5 billion is from that low and middle skilled labor coming back into the country. So this 3.5 billion that's coming from the 3 million, it's pennies, it's pocket change compared to what they're making. A recent studies show that the Sri Lankan diaspora in the US are the fourth most contributing immigrant community to the US economy. Phenomenal. They're not doing menial jobs. Some of these individuals are high performers. They're contributing a great deal. And they also don't want to get duped. They don't want to be their money to be stolen. And there's all this. So if you can create structures saying, here is the transparency, here's how you can invest in businesses. We're going to make it ease of business. We're going to make it very efficient for you to come in, identify businesses and invest. We're going to make it attractive for your children to come and engage here and connect with their roots. We're going to make it pleasant, not just as a tourist destination for you to come and see your motherland, but to see this is a place where we can make something of our own. This is your home country. You are well and truly a first-class citizen in Sri Lanka. This is your home. If you create that atmosphere, how many more will come back? And I believe there are so many people. I'm not talking about those who are, the politically motivated. I'm just everyday Sri Lankans who are living abroad. They would want to come and invest. And right now, if we have 3 million living abroad, Sri Lankans abroad, we're talking about if they just send $350 a month through the conventional banking systems to their family members here, to their friends, or even if they invest in a charity or donate to a charity or whatever, that will bring in $1 billion a month. And we only need $500 to $700 a month to pay the fuel bills and the essential supplies and all that. We wouldn't have an issue, just 350. But they don't trust the government. They don't believe in what they're doing. They see that the political culture hasn't changed, so they don't want to invest. But you can create forums for that. So I believe it's possible with the right leadership. It can be done, and we need to start pushing for that as a new generation of political leaders.
Okay, so moving on to the second question and following up what we discussed previously. So you said that there is a new generation of middle class people in India, around 6 million. So
600 million.
600 million. So
Yeah.
sorry about that. 600 million folks. 600 million middle class income earning individuals in Mumbai. And you said that it was a untapped market to promote our products and everything. So as a government, knowing that we have a potential market, what can we do to bring them down here for them to experience Sri Lanka? Are there any policies that we can implement? Is there any marketing tactics that we can do? What do you think about that, Prashant? What can the government do?
So just a correction on the quote there. According to the Mumbai University, 600 million Indians are middle income. So if there are 600 million Indians, by the way, I just have to say we're about to have a power cut, so I might lose lighting, so my lighting might go down, but I'll keep talking. If there are 600 million Indians in the middle class,
segment of the show, so
yeah, cool. So
All right, folks, and welcome back to Politics 2.0, a SAR political reveal with Prashan De Visser. We were talking about how the government could implement strategies to bring down this newly emerged class of middle class income holders in India. Prashant, you were describing about what they can do, what the government can do, what are the strategies that they can implement to make sure that we tap into this potential market.
Yeah. Thank you, Kai. So I was talking about, the Mumbai University put out a research. 600 million Indians have stepped into being middle class. That means they're spending between per person $2 to $10 a day. And so, as an economy just lying a few kilometers south of the Indian border, uh, and is my connection still clear?
Yeah, it's clear. It's crystal clear.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. So we can look into what are they spending on, what are their consumer habits, and what do we have to offer here as an island nation to start creating industries around that. And not just India, we're talking of China here. Other growing economies like Vietnam is booming, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, all these economies, looking at saying as a regional game, what are the things that we can offer? That's where the government is sitting. Obviously, tourism is going to have to start looking at not just the West. We're going to start looking at how do we attract these players to come over here. I've been an advocate of looking at theme parks in Sri Lanka, international theme parks coming here, and it becomes just this tropical island destination, but also has theme parks and so many experiential tourism that to come in, ecotourism, to really be the heartland for ecotourism and so on, to really be a player at this point and coupling up with the Maldivian experience and Sri Lanka experience, doing certain things together. There's so much potential there, and targeting South Asian market as well. But also looking at certain industries of we're going to start seeing a boom in the electric car industry. We're going to start seeing a further boom in the tech spaces and so on. So what does Sri Lanka have right now that we could use? Whether it's language skills, customer service, servicing industries need to go forward. But at the same time, when you look at our tech industries, how can we increase our capacity and finding our niche to start providing industries that are providing a great opportunity to expand our economy, targeting these consumers in these parts of the world. So we have to start innovating. We have to start looking at these industries. And at the same time, I really feel that Sri Lanka has the ability to be an amazing destination. It could be the Geneva of Asia. It could be the Switzerland of Asia when it comes to hosting international conferences and gatherings and all the corporates having come to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is the place to have great new ideas and brainstorming and innovation for the region. Come here and we can create that industries here. At the same time, looking at opportunities for Sri Lanka to have economies around that, in the sense of not just it becomes a conference venue, it becomes a place where, but then you have so many subculture or sub industries around that. Also looking at education, more and more higher education is becoming so expensive in the West, and they're looking for other venues to have experiential learning. If you want to learn world religions, what better country than Sri Lanka? If you want to learn about peace building and rebuilding a nation, what better country to have internships, experiences, even universities doing summer programs here, and then scaling up to having programs for fall and the spring for various, whether it's industries, whether it's sociology, whether it's psychology, whether it's religion, all these things we can start marketing it. And so that's just like a quick brainstorm with you right now, thinking out loud. Just imagine if you put some great minds together and start thinking, what have we never tapped into? Let's be innovative, let's be creative, and not looking for a cut for yourself. Most of these politicians sit and say, how much can I break from this? What's my percentage? And therefore, that immediately cripples their ability to think of sustainable, long term, transformative change for our nation's economy. So we need to start doing that soon, now.
Thank you, Prashant. And I think the fact that most of these politicians remain corrupt and trying to get a little commission out of all of these things is one of the main reasons why, as you said, that we are not progressing forward as a nation. And with that being said, there is a lot of untapped avenues of incurring an income and building our nation's economy here. Moving aside, this is a very generic question. So, Prashant, you faced a power cut just now. What do you think about what's going on? They have increased the electricity tariffs, and I think they're going to increase the water tariff as well. What do you think? What's going on? How do you feel about this?
So years of inefficient services, years of corruption are now catching up in ways that's devastating our lives, disrupting our lives, and it has to be revamped and rehauled, looked into any sort of because what's happened is government jobs and services were used as a political gift bag. And so, so many people who are not competent, who shouldn't have the job, who are not educated for it, who are not competent for it, or who are actual individuals of deep corruption, have been given positions in key locations of this country, key infrastructure providing departments of this country. And as a result, we're suffering. And so there needs to be an overhaul, and there needs to be a boldness to correct these things and grounding after corruption. We are a nation, an island nation, a tropical nation that shouldn't be having power cuts in the sense of with solar energy we could be doing so much with the oceans around and using the powerful wind and the waves and so much of opportunity we could have, we haven't touched it because this system benefited the corrupt few. And now people have to start asking, your lives have got inconvenient because we've been silent. And now we need to hold these politicians accountable. We want results, we want change, and we want it now. And so we have to push for it.
All right. So, unfortunately, folks, that is a wrap of our show. We are running out of time. But before we head out, Prashant, I just want to say thank you for tuning in with us. Thank you for joining in and giving us this very vital and intriguing message. I only request you if you could give us a small shout out. That way we can spread the message, what we discussed about, all of these untapped potential marketing strategies and everything. Along with that being said, Prashant, you said that there are many individuals in Sri Lanka with a lot of ideas, a lot of innovative ideas, and everything out there. They could reach out to us, and especially to you, um,
Yeah.
given your organizations and everything. So why don't you give Relax Radio and Politics 2.0 a little shout out so that we can promote innovativeness and we can request everyone out there who has innovative ideas to reach out to us and let us know so that we can help them out.
Mhm. Yeah, so I would like to make a shout out as part of one of the organizations that I'm part of, Centenary Movement. 100.lk is our website. The number is 100.lk. And you can, it is looking at Sri Lanka at 2048 and a new generation that's outside the establishment rebuilding this country. So we'd love for you to come and share your ideas there. And also having platforms like this to discuss and share and refine your understandings is very important. But we're looking to see a new generation not just educating themselves, but creating a platform for new thinking infused into the system to transform the political culture. So come and join us, check us out, www.100.lk. And let's be the generation that brings about change and does it selflessly for our children and our children's children.
All right. Thank you, Prashant, for joining in with us. I hope that we get to meet someday and we get to discuss about what we can do as a generation to improve our country's economy, improve our country's politics, and everything. So, hoping to see you again soon, Prashant. Thank you for tuning in. This is Politics 2.0 with Kai Parker.